It's closing time at the last. I've just totally lost the saying there. Closing time at the last chance saloon. Is that the one?
Yeah, that'll do.
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the First4LCFC podcast. With a relatively depleted squad tonight. It's just myself and Ed, but Jamie's not with us tonight, nor is Austin. But Ed, how are you?
I'm feeling good. Hopefully, we'll have a good opportunity to have a chat today without Jamie's awful opinions getting in the way as we talk about the football.
Well, little do the people know we've been on this Skype call now for 40 minutes talking about everything but football. But thankfully, none of that's going to make the cut. I don't think many people would want to listen to that.
It was great content, though.
I mean, I feel like you've certainly educated me on life. Maybe now that you've come to the end of your PhD, obviously, congratulations. Hopefully, you pass. But for those who didn't know, Ed has been arduously studying now for what feels like all of his life. So now he's got his life back at a perfect time when he can't actually do anything with it in these COVID times. But how do you feel about it? Do you feel like it's a weight off your shoulders anyway?
Well, I have my exam about it next year, which it's not completely gone. But to be fair, I didn't have much of a life to begin with. So now this is gone. Maybe I'll have slightly more of a life, but still, it's not great.
Okay, on that promising note, we'll pick up before it turns into what we're basically speaking about off there. But obviously, looking back now, the fixtures are coming thick and fast. We were on a high against Brighton, a fantastic victory, and then in true Leicester City style, we were brought back down to earth. At the time of recording yesterday now against Everton in what was a very flat, a boring, an uninspiring defeat. I know you watched the game, Ed. Did it actually surprise you that we lost? Because I can't say honestly, hand on heart, that I didn't semi-expect it. It's Leicester City. It's Leicester City, the team we've grown up with for all these years. So, what do you make of that defeat?
I thought, obviously, any defeat's disappointing against any team, needless to say. But Everton have largely impressed this season and are sort of up and around where we are towards the top of the league. So this could be against a team that we're sort of battling it out for European place at the end of the season. And that probably makes it even more disappointing how much of a sort of met game this was for both sides. I had it, just for listeners' background info, I was watching it with the volume off. So perhaps less swayed than the by commentators' comments. But I just thought like it was a bit of a nothing game. I didn't think though either side impressed in terms of sort of creating chances or even looking good. They just looked like two solid teams who could do decent this year, but there was no sort of flair and creativity and chances. And coming off the back of a nice 3-0 win against Brighton, especially with the tough fixtures we've got coming up next, this seems like a really disappointing both performance and result. You can sort of put up with losing it if you still put in a good performance. It's obviously still frustrating, but it was just like, this isn't really even entertaining to watch. Like, what's going on?
Well, I mean, I think you've addressed some key points there. It's a bit frustrating that Jamie isn't with us. Obviously, we take the mick out of Jamie for often sitting on the fence. But I mean, he was almost irate in the chat that me, Ed, and Jamie have yesterday. I'll read out one message I've just found. He goes, "Commentators waxing lyrical about Everton. Am I being biased, or have they not been amazing? A goalkeeper error, a goalmouth scramble, and sticking 11 behind the ball." I mean. But the thing is, Ancelotti has now beaten Rodgers 4 times in obviously the 4 meetings that they've had throughout their careers. And for me, if it means a team's going to win, just like a lot of people criticise Mourinho, he's obviously analysed Leicester. you can clearly see, you don't have to be a football manager to see that we just don't play well against a team who's going to sit in. I mean, you've got a player like Jamie Vardy who, as great as he is, and now, I think yesterday he actually surpassed Muzzy, is it, as the most appearances in a Leicester City shirt. He just doesn't fit that sort of style. I feel like obviously we're not going to criticise solely Jamie Vardy for that, but ultimately we have struggled to break down teams who sit in. So for Jamie to be getting as irate as he did, when ultimately, you know, if we were in Everton's position, would we not set up the same? I'm sure we'll come up against teams this season who will do very similar to, and maybe unfairly I said that's very similar to what we did against Man City, but ultimately that's what Pep Guardiola came out with after the match, saying, this is a team who sits in, they're just going to wait for an opportunity to attack. I think the point Jamie was getting at was that the goals that Everton scored weren't on the counter attack, they weren't particularly sort of inspiring. But I mean, did you see that as a negative, or did you think they lined up with reason and did a job on us?
I think they've were not with their key attacking player in James Rodriguez anyway, and they're also without other defenders, but people like Coleman and Digne. Their fullbacks are extremely attacking, creative players. So perhaps they were sort of set, just playing the only way they could. And I don't know, we won the league playing, but defensive, counter-attacking football and taking our chances when they came. So it can work, but no, if the commentators were thinking Everton were amazing, I don't think they were. I think they were the clinical when the chances came along and they took them, and we were very much off the pace compared to how we can play. But I honestly wasn't impressed with either team, to be honest.
I think fundamentally, what we can feel hard done by is the fact that we've now conceded 7 goals direct from corners, which is actually 2 or 3 ahead of the second team in that leaderboard, which I think is Sheffield United from memory. So it's a bit frustrating for me that if you can't do the basics properly, like a set piece is a dead ball situation. That's the one thing on a training ground you can prepare for, if you like. You can try your best to sort of defend a set piece. But the way in which we conceded that second goal, it was just like, I don't know, musical statues sort of to me. Like it was Casper Schmeichel pulled off like a wonder save, but it just felt like to me no one else was reacting. It's just frustrating that this is obviously something that's a recurring theme this season, and maybe that is something that fans, on social media, you can see that's something they're calling for. One, in the fact that our actual attacking set pieces aren't great, and two, that the defence of them is almost non-existent at times. So, I mean, is this something that we can be held responsible for?
Well, it's obviously not working. You don't need me to tell you that. But when you were making that point, it did make me think about, and it's very easy to say in hindsight, but I do think a lot of people raised eyebrows when the team selection was made and was announced. And if we are concerned about defending set pieces, it's often to do with things like organisation and taking responsibility for your man. Then the club captain, like the lead dressing room leader, whatever, not playing at centre back when we're not got Evans, and favouring Ndidi at centre back instead, and bringing Mendy into Ndidi's position. What did you think about that when it was first announced? What do you think about it now? And was it a mistake? Do you think we'd do that again? Should we need to, or have we tried it and it's not worked?
Well, this is what I mean, because I think you tweeted saying maybe half an hour before, as in you messaged me saying that it looks like Wolf's going to start at centre back from a league team sheet you saw, and obviously I put the poll up before the team news was even announced, saying who's the better centre back, Wilf or Wes, and I've just looked at the results now. It's 52% of over 200 people thought that indeed he's the better centre back, but I'm actually in agreement. Well, I think in agreement with you that Wes Morgan is the club captain. The fact is, he's got multiple years' experience as a leader from centre back. Ndidi is a central defensive midfielder. Play both players in their preferred position. I think you can get a better sort of result for the team ultimately. So that is bizarre because obviously it's not like Wes Morgan's had too many minutes under his belt or anything like that. If anything, now we've just given excessive minutes to two players in the same position for absolutely no gain with some big matches coming up.
I do also wonder. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Well, no, I was just saying, like, whilst indeed he is a fantastic retriever of the ball, and there was occasions yesterday where he still put fantastic tackles in. I do think it's more so from things like set pieces where you've got just this sort of innate knowledge in Wes Morgan's mind that he knows how to organise a backline. He did it successfully, obviously playing alongside Robert Huth, but also with Kasper Schmeichel behind him. So I don't know. Only Rodgers will know the answer to that one. But I just feel like with at home, if you should just call on your obvious replacement.
Well, that I'd also argue playing the players in the right position. I know I won't go into depth on this because we've spoke about Mendy and Ndidi a lot recently, and everyone knows my opinions. But if we were to play Morgan, it would put Ndidi in his best position, which I would argue would also free up the attacking players more because they don't need to have a defensive ideas in the back of their mind. And we obviously had issues in attacking the last game. We actually had more attacking players on the pitch than we have recently. We had the wingers.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because I was reading discussion earlier that I've not seen like an average player sort of heat map or anything, but that Madison was playing a lot deeper. So I mean, maybe that does fall into what you're saying in regards to with no Ndidi, players are sort of coming deeper to sort of get the ball, but it's not even that. It's you push it up further up the pitch. If you got all these attacking players on there, the one change Everton made from their previous fixture was Olsen, who, whilst being Sweden's number one, we all know that international teams play a handful of times throughout the year. He's barely had any domestic sort of minutes under his belt. And there's a couple of times early on when Vardy almost closed the ball down. I just felt like we didn't put him under anywhere near enough pressure. And this is again like you're playing at home, go out on the front foot and sort of take the game to the opposition. It just felt so limp, and that from the get go, it just felt like a really boring exchange of like two teams who weren't willing to give too much away, and then obviously Everton take the lead, and we just failed to. We didn't come out in the second half with any more sort of vigor or impetus to turn the game around. So.
Well, I've got a point to add to that. I'm going to whip some stats out because you know me. And I said I'd discuss this stat if we lost to Brighton, but we lost to Everton anyway, so I can still use it. It's our difference between our home and away form this season. And what you've been saying about we're certainly a lot less good when teams sit back, which you would imagine is going to happen more when we're the home side. Well, away from home this season, we're actually the second best in the league. We've played 6, won 5 of them, and only lost 1. And we've got 15 goals in those 6 games, so averaging nearly 3 goals every away match. And given that we conceded 0, we didn't score against Liverpool away. We actually got 15 goals in 5 away matches, which is obviously excellent. Well, at home, we've played 7, we've lost 4 of them, and we've only scored 9. So we're averaging near enough 1 goal a game at home and 3 goals a game away. That's not like a small amount. That is a very significant difference between our home and away form. We've also conceded 10 goals at home and 7 away. So our defence is better away and our attack is. So is that something to do with, people now we've sort of solidified our place as like a sort of top 8 sort of side, and we've been on very good form this year and last year? Are people now coming to Leicester and just sort of shutting up shop and thinking a point here, or even let's go defensive and we know we can nick one, is going to be a tactic as we progress, is going to be more and more commonplace when lining up at the King Power?
I don't think they're coming here to get a point. I don't think they're cutting us that much respect. I just think that they think, look, let's come in, let's sit deep, let's go into the break probably, on even terms, and we're just going to find an opportunity on the counter attack to beat this Leicester City team, because they are so toothless in coming forwards. Like, I just don't. We've just really struggled to integrate Vardy into trying to beat these teams who sort of sit back, because he's not the sort of striker who comes in and joins play. Like, he needs to be feeding on service ultimately. So I'm not really sure how we're going to solve a problem like this. I think it's going to cause issues further down the line in the Europa League as well, potentially. So, I mean, obviously that's a discussion for another day, but I just feel like it's not up to us to expect teams to come to the King Power and let us play our game. We should be intelligent enough to somehow find a way of beating these teams. But ultimately, next up, we are away at Tottenham Hotspur, who actually have the best home defence by a goal. Actually, they're joint best home defence with Burnley, actually. Which is weird, but they've only conceded 6 at home, and they've got Jose Mourinho in charge, who is a very, very defensive-minded manager. I put the question out on Twitter earlier: how do we beat Spurs? Ignoring all of the obvious by scoring more than them.
That is a good tactic, though.
The general consensus wasn't that optimistic. Are you in agreement? Do you think this is going to be an incredibly tricky game for us on Sunday afternoon?
Well, if we're going to draw upon the line of reasoning that we've just had about against teams who sit back, well, Spurs, who whilst have been excellent this season, generally speaking, have not, at least against the better teams, been going out all out attack. As you sort of touched upon, the Jose Mourinho approach, they've often been more defensive and soaking up the pressure. And then when you've got Kane and Son in attack, it's threatening. It's every time they get the ball, if they've got like a 2-on-2 in attack, or even those 2 against 3 of our defenders, it's scary time. So I'm not. This is going to be a tactical game, because they're 2 teams towards the top of the league, but how are we going to play this? Because they're going to sit back, I feel like, and if we go out and attack, they can pick us off. But then if we sit back and invite pressure on, then they have got players who can do stuff a bit magic or create something out of nothing. So I think this is going to be a Rodgers versus Mourinho off. I'm not really sure how to do it.
Let's make no mistakes. Tottenham Hotspur, in my opinion, are the best counter-attacking team in the Premier League. I feel like Liverpool. A lot of people might be thinking more about Liverpool. I just don't feel like Liverpool play a counter-attacking style. They might have, you could argue, better attacking players, but as you've already mentioned, Son, Kane, obviously, you got more players like Bale who can come in. You got a lot of players, but I think like this season, Mourinho's finally found that balance in terms of you've got those hard-working players in the middle who can break it up. Obviously, someone like Højbjerg, he's not going to he's not getting applauded for being a world-class player, but I think what he does and breaks play up. But then obviously that allows for the players in front of them to just purely have that attacking sort of creativity, which for me is obviously dangerous. But just looking at Tottenham's home record on Flash Scores, the app I'm looking at now, you open it up and it's a sea of green W's. They drew at home to West Ham back on the 18th of October. They drew with Newcastle towards the end of September. Obviously, they lost to Everton early on in the season, but beyond that, it's a fairly daunting place to go. A place they don't really concede that many, obviously, as we've already alluded to.
The last two home games were Man City and Arsenal, and they won them both 2-0. just for some context.
I'd not often can. I'm actually struggling to see how we can even rationalise a game plan. I just don't. I know people are going to be obviously thinking, but we went to Man City and we beat them. That's obviously the obvious one, but we failed to beat Liverpool. And looking back now, Man City have had a very underwhelming start to the season, so maybe that does take the gloss off it slightly. But I'm looking at this Tottenham team, and if the only way I see us beating them is I don't see us outplaying them or doing it in a pretty sense. We have to out Mourinho to get a result, and by that I mean I can only see us win this is just playing on the counter attack. But I don't really see how that leaves the rest of the game. It can't just be two teams sitting back off each other. I don't expect Tottenham to start and play on the counter attack. I do expect them to sort of dominate possession, but for us just to be extremely resolute defensively. But I just don't see us limiting them to that few chances that they're not going to find the back of the net on at least a couple of occasions.
What formation do you think we're going to play?
Again, for me, I'd like to see us here start with three centre backs and play five at the back. For me, it has to be a case of us making it as crowded and I'm going to allude to again as Mourinho as possible. Like looking at the Tottenham Liverpool game yesterday, you could put a blanket over the Tottenham players towards the end of that second half. They had no intention of controlling possession. They wanted to sit in. It was becoming a bit of an ugly game. The ball was pinging off players, shins. Like it was just. But the thing is, Mourinho has trained his team at being good at that. We're not just going to suddenly go and play all negative. I just feel like we'll be too open. There's been occasions against a lot lesser opposition, like maybe Braga, where you found players like Fofana stepping out of position. And it's just that split second where you allow that split second, someone like Son or Cain, they're going to punish you. I just feel like for us to have discipline for that long, off the back of an inconsistent season, to say the least. But then again, it'd be the most Leicester thing to go there and get a result. But on paper, which obviously the game isn't played, I just don't see us being disciplined enough. I don't feel like we've got enough experience in that back line. We're going to need all of our players to be put in, 9 out of 10s in. But I don't see it happening myself. Is it possible we can go there and get a result by outscoring Tottenham?
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, who knows? They've actually not. Obviously, they just lost against Liverpool in a top of the table clash. I wonder how they'll retaliate to that. They've actually only won one of the last 4 games in the Premier League. Whilst there has been some tough teams in there who they've played against, so it's not exactly like they've been rubbish. I do wonder how they'll respond. There's a lot of games in a short period of time. There's obviously, so you got to fitness factor. Who knows? These are things completely out of our control. But I don't know. With a proper defence and players playing in the proper decisions, maybe we will step up. We've already seen it this season in games against bigger teams. Off the top of my head, obviously Man City. We did well against Arsenal, did we not? Have we played anyone else in the league that's up there, or is that it? We beat Wolves. Oh yeah, we lost to Liverpool, but that's Liverpool, and we always lose there. We get thrashed. I can see it. Interestingly, as I'm looking at the league now, we've not drawn a game this season, so I'm going to predict a draw if we're going to do predictions now.
No.
I've done it. So we're going to do them.
But well, presumably a score draw is what you're getting at.
Yeah, I see it like a 2-2.
I'm just not. I don't share your optimism. I don't share your optimism. I'm looking at how they lined up against Liverpool though, and trying to what I'd regard as their weaknesses. And for me, it has to be their fullbacks. Well, obviously they're subject to change, but say it is Davis and Aurier. Neither of those, then they're not world class players. They're good players, good Premier League players. But you get someone like Barnes on his day, who I hope starts this fixture, and you want him squaring up against those sorts of players and ultimately getting deliveries into the box, or if not cutting in and taking the opportunities himself. But beyond that. Dyer and Alderweireld, they've been solid. I mean, whether or not Dyer is a centre back, it's seemingly that's the position he's playing in. But I think it's what the damage they can cause at the other end of the pitch, and it's how we respond to potentially going a goal down as well. Coming back from a goal, if anything, our heads just totally drop if we go behind. But ultimately, as it goes in football, the longer we keep it at 0-0, the more our confidence will grow. And I can only hope that will be the case. You've gone with a score draw. I myself,
I think we'll play 5 at the back, and all Brighton will pocket Son, and Fuchs at centre back will pocket Harry Kane. It's just obvious, isn't it?
That's a bold prediction. I'd like to play that one back next week. But for me,
yeah, don't play it back next week.
I am going to say 2-0 Spurs. And it's not often I don't even see us scoring. And obviously things like set pieces or penalties are very rife this season, especially with VAR. But I'd love to be proven wrong. And it's often the case. You feel negative about something, you get pleasantly surprised. But I just think Mourinho, there's just something about him this season. He's obviously, people were writing him off last year. But I think he's got a good balance this team. Whilst I'd hate to see Spurs do well overall over the course of a season, I just feel like it's closing time at the last. I've just totally lost the saying there. Closing time at the last chance saloon. Is that the one?
Yeah, that'll do.
That'll do. For players like Kane, I feel like if they don't win anything this season, I don't know how anyone at Tottenham can convince him to do another season at the club. I think he's given it more than enough time, and now he's at the peak of his career. He's starting to not even play as a centre forward anymore. If he wants to win personal accolades for scoring goals and for winning actual silverware, which you may or may not disagree with that's important anymore, he needs to move on. And I just feel like there's something about this Spurs team that they need to push on this season. But they'll do
you
that.
Think we could get him as a Vardy replacement?
Him
and Aubameyang.
I'll have to say no to that one right
But
now.
you say we're as big as Spurs, and we've won the league recently. So if you want silverware,
well, have we won that much silverware other than.
Are you telling me he does not dream of getting balls whipped in by wing back Brighton at night?
He's already had that, to be fair. I'm not sure whether Albrighton was at. I don't think I was saying it was before Albrighton's time, but lest we forget, Kane has played for Leicester City before.
He wants to come back. He knows. He loved this time, eh?
No, unfortunately, at this stage of his career, Kane will not be angling for a move to Leicester City. But no, ultimately, I feel like he and his teammates will probably get the better of us this weekend. But then again, hope they don't, and that'd be nice. So yeah, I'm sure if Jamie was here, he'd probably be. I don't think he's too optimistic either.
Well, there you go then.
So as far as match previews go, that's nicely wrapped up. Another thing we miss when Jamie isn't here, of course, is having an actual agenda. But you know, I feel like I maybe owe James Maddison an apology, or do I? That's the thing, because had this podcast been recorded after the Brighton game, that's the first time James Maddison's ever scored a Premier League double. He scored a fantastic Riyad Mahrez-esque goal. Obviously, he scored another one as well, which is tasty enough. But then he went back to his old ways, in my opinion, against Everton and didn't really turn up. So, again, if you want to be deemed a good player, a player who should be fighting for that England jersey, you need to be consistent. And I don't think he has shown that consistency yet. So, half-assed apology for you there, James, as an avid listener of this podcast, I'm sure. But beyond that, go and prove me wrong and do some magic against Spurs. But then beyond that, I'm looking at Leicester City's fixture list. Did you say we've got Man United next?
Boxing Day.
You don't know what you're going to get from Man United. If anything, we'll probably take lead in that one. So, and then
they've just conceded as we talk live. They're 3-2 up against Sheffield United, with like 3 minutes to go. So, can you read anything into that? I don't know. We struggled against Sheffield United, who have been the worst Premier League team ever thus far this season, statistically. So,
well, you rave about Harry Maguire, but ever since you've stood up for him avidly, he's put a couple more questionable performances in. So I feel like Jamie Vardy will be licking his lips at the prospect of coming up against his old teammate.
Are there two teams towards the top of the league that are more inconsistent than Leicester and Man U? I literally, like that game, Leicester Man U could be 3-0 to either side.
Well, along those lines, I've got another shocking statistic. This season, Chelsea haven't beaten a team who, at the time of playing, were in the top 10.
There you go. That is a shocking statistic.
I think it was at the time of playing, or who are in the top 10 now. But either way, it's a team who are in the top 10. And so it goes to show that. Because then looking at even who we've played so far this season, we've not actually played anyone. Well, obviously, I've played a couple of big teams, but ultimately, the points we have dropped have been against lesser teams, which obviously when you see the fixtures come out at the start of the season, you think, well, their teams are going to beat, they're the ones we're not going to beat. So, but obviously it was around this time last season that our season sort of, well, maybe a bit late at January time, that it sort of nosedived as well. So I just don't think, well, myself speaking, I just feel like there's nothing, we haven't done a lot to prove that that's not going to be the case again this year.
I just think it's inconsistency. Like, at least it's not every game is awful. We are showing that we can do it at times. It's when every game starts being awful. But like you said, other than the Liverpool game, and maybe the Everton one, you'd like to think we'd get something from it. But if you get a draw or they sneak a win, it's not as if it's embarrassing. But yeah, the other defeats in the league, Villa, West Ham, and Fulham all at home with an aggregate of 6-1 to them. It's not it sort of just backs up your view on our play against teams who aren't going and coming at us and attacking. It's these teams, and that Fulham result is just unforgivable. Really, let's not talk about that. I'll get irate.
If it's not even then, like I get that Fulham, Scotty Parker. To be fair, they found a bit of form, and they were very good against Everton before the game. They played us, but the goals we conceded weren't like scrappy goals. Even it was frustrating that Fulham actually managed a way to sort of carve us open. Obviously, one of the goals was from a penalty, but I've totally forgot. What was the score in that game?
2-1.
So I seem to remember watching it and thinking they're cutting us open at ease here. I think there was an opportunity. Was it Lookman who played someone in, and I think Schmeichel did a good save. I just felt like that's what I mean. If teams like Fulham at the bottom of the table can slide us open, I dread to think that put us up against a better attacking or a counter-attacking team. It's going to get a bit trickier to sort of.
Here's my curveball comment about what I would like to see against Spurs. These teams, let's assume they're not going to go out and attack us. Or when we're playing against teams that sit back a bit, I think we look best when we've got Iheanacho on the pitch. Why don't we go like 5-3-2, start him, have the proper midfield three, no pissing about, Maddison, Tielemans, and Ndidi, put some wing backs on who want to attack and get some balls in, and then have like Iheanacho up there to link the play with Vardy. And I just feel like whenever he comes, I feel a bit sorry for the guy. Like, obviously he doesn't score or even get an assist every game. That would be weird if he did, but I always think he does some good link-up play, and we do look better when we've got him on in those sorts of scenarios.
I mean, I can see your argument. Whether or not, I just don't see Rodgers doing that. I mean, that'd be quite a bold change. But it was a couple of seasons ago when Spurs still played at Wembley that Iheanacho scored a bit of a worldie away at Spurs. But that's what I mean. I feel like, if Iheanacho's game is better than Vardy's in any sense, it is in terms of link-up play. But I feel like if you're going to start a striker, it shouldn't be because he's good at link-up play.
I'm saying start 2 strikers.
Well, yeah, I get that. But similar to your dislike for Mendy, I just feel like let's play one who's really good when he is involved, rather than sort of carrying 2 for the sake of it. And then, if anything, because of our lack of sort of good substitutions, at least that way we've got Iheanacho to bring on if we want to sort of, really go mental at the end of the game. Probably chasing it, but I don't know. I think it's obviously I think Rodgers has said that Castagna might. What did he say? He might be back for this one, at least from the bench. Obviously, Ricardo's a little bit off still. So I don't know really, but I'd be shocked if I saw Iheanacho on the starting lineup.
Even more than you were when indeed he was playing centre-back, when we have a centre-back club captain on the bench.
But did Ndidi not start this season playing at centre-back, or was that the end of last season or something?
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Well, either way, he's played there before, but no, I think I've banged that drum enough. I'm not feeling confident ahead of Spurs. And then, I'm not the most positive person on this podcast. This is often the case. And I'd love to be proven wrong, but I just feel it's going to take an absolute, fantastic showing from us. But ultimately, Spurs are a bit of a bogey team, especially away from home. Just looking at our head-to-head. So I'm not optimistic, and I will stick with my 2-0. Hopefully we do. I presumably we'll get a podcast in before festivities and the Boxing Day match against Manchester United. But yeah, that's been it from me and Ed. Probably a bit of a ramble, a bit of a different style. But hopefully those who are still tuning in have enjoyed it. And Jamie actually wasn't with us through illness this evening. So if any of you are still listening, wish Jamie well. I'm sure he would like that. Send him a little tweet.
Yeah, I was just going to say, can everybody who's still listening, and he doesn't know about this, so it will be a nice surprise. If you're on Twitter, Jamie's handle is @Thorpie, spelled THORPIE, and then 54. Can you just everyone message him saying get well soon? Feel free to send him a really weird and random GIF. The more weird, the better. But I think he'd appreciate that. Just give him a little bit of more positivity about his health.
I mean, I feel we've definitely exposed ourselves to see how many people actually give a fuck about our podcast, and two, more concerningly, probably about Jamie's health here, when 1 or 2 people actually end up tweeting. I mean, Jamie himself takes about 5 days to listen to the podcast. I think he's still 3 podcasts behind, in fact. So he probably won't even know about it till the new year. So, but it's a nice touch, a bit of romanticism there from Ed. Obviously going soft in his post PhD days. But nonetheless, thank you for those who have listened. I hope you're more positive than me.